Today, we are going to talk a little bit about Trump's new $100,000 H-1B visa fee. So for those of you who missed it, over the weekend, Friday night actually, Donald Trump announced that they were going to impose a $100,000 fee for every new H-1B visa applicant. At the time, it was stated that it would be an annual fee, so that the $100,000 would be paid every year for an H-1B sponsorship. And an H-1B typically lasts 3 years, so that's $300,000 per individual. And naturally, there was a lot of panic around this because H-1B workers are actually a very critical part of our labor market in the United States, and they occupy a lot of very important jobs in the tech and finance sectors. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this and address concerns that we've heard from our families, particularly our students who are studying in the United States for grad school and hoping to get an H-1B visa after they graduate. So firstly, what is an H-1B visa? An H-1B visa is a work visa. It allows you to work legally in the United States. It is distinct from OPT or STEM OPT, which is optional practical training. That is a 1 or 3 year period if it's a STEM OPT, during which you can work in the United States after graduating from a U.S. university without a visa. So OPT is working without a visa, but it is legal. And it is 1 year if it's not a STEM degree, and it is 3 years if it is a STEM certified degree. Then during that period, normally you will apply for an H-1B, or your employer will apply for an H-1B, which is a work visa that allows you to work legally in the United States for 3 years. And it can be renewed thereafter so that you can work 6 years, etc. That's what an H-1B is. In terms of who uses H-1B visas, about 70% of H-1B recipients are Indian, 10% are Chinese, and the vast majority of the H-1B recipients are coming from the tech sector, consulting, and finance. So for example, the number one employer using H-1B visas is Amazon at roughly 10,000 H-1B visas per year, which is a not insignificant percentage of all H-1B visas that are granted. Let's talk a little bit about the rationale for this policy. So the stated rationale from the Trump administration is that H-1Bs are being abused by employers to pay foreign workers less than they would have to pay domestic workers. So basically, these people are competing with domestic workers for these kind of high-paying tech jobs, et cetera. What the data shows is quite contrary to that. So H-1B recipients, they generally earn a median wage of $108,000 a year compared to the median wage in the United States of $45,000 a year, so paid considerably higher than the median. In addition to that, H-1B employers are legally required to pay the higher of, firstly, the actual wage that is paid to other individuals in the same role at your company, meaning that if you're Amazon and you hire a software engineer for $100,000 and they're an American, you cannot then hire an H-1B worker and pay them $50,000. You have to pay them the same, which is a basic feature of non-discrimination in employment law. Or if there isn't another person at your company who occupies that position, you have to pay them the prevailing wage for the same occupation in the geographic area where the individual is working. Basically, what does a software engineer in Seattle make? Something along those lines. So the bottom line here is hiring H-1B workers is definitely not cheaper than hiring Americans. You have the actual cost to file a petition, including legal fees, often runs as high as $10,000 per petition, not all of which are successful. So in general, and I can speak from personal experience because Genius employs many individuals on H-1B visas, hiring somebody with an H-1B is more costly, and you do it because there aren't Americans who have the same skill sets or the same level of talent. So you're paying extra, but you're getting it, or you're getting something that you couldn't get elsewhere. So the rationale is just nonsense that the Trump administration is using. It's not true. It's just like a soundbite that he can feed to his political base. Moving on, what does this proclamation from Donald Trump actually say? What does the actual text say? So initially, it was described as a $100,000 annual fee that would accompany new H-1B applications. It was not clear whether or not that would apply to H-1B renewals. It was unclear if it would apply to individuals who have applied but have yet to receive their H-1B. The administration then came out and said, no, it's not an annual fee, it's a one-time fee, which is most certainly not what was said initially, but it is what they are saying now. And it does not apply to any current H-1B holders. Anybody who has already applied but not yet received an H-1B visa So the people who applied this last cycle but have yet to get H-1B approval, there was a concern that individuals outside the United States who have an H-1B would get charged $100,000 if they came back. That's also not the case. So basically, if you already have an H-1B, you've already applied, it doesn't apply to you. If you are going to be applying for an H-1B in the future, then it does apply to you. So that then brings us to the most important question, I think, of today, which is any of this legal or enforceable? Can Trump actually unilaterally declare a $100,000 fee for applying for H-1B visas? And that's a really easy answer. The answer is obviously no. This is not legal for any number of reasons. Trump has actually tried this once before. He tried it in 2020 during COVID as a way to bolster the domestic labor market by restricting H-1B visas. A court then overturned him fairly promptly, saying that he had absolutely no statutory authority to make those, to micromanage the labor market in the United States, was, I believe, the direct quote. And so this is actually not the first rodeo here, and almost certainly we will see the same thing. We'll see firstly an injunction, and then we'll see it get overturned, which has been the theme of all of Trump's behavior related to foreign workers, foreign students, et cetera, this year. It's been a lot of talk, a lot of scary proclamations and executive orders, followed by immediate injunctions and then being overturned. Now, that doesn't save the United States from the reputational damage. People still look and think maybe the U.S. is less welcoming or less of a sure thing than it used to be, so I'll go elsewhere. So it doesn't stop that. But from a legal standpoint, if you're coming up on applying for an H-1B, I would hold tight. The reality is that there is zero statutory basis for Donald Trump to be able to do this. In fact, there's specific statutes that say that the executive branch can only charge fees for the adjudication of petitions, meaning what they have to pay people in order to look at these H-1B petitions. They cannot charge fees in excess of that. So this is explicitly illegal and a violation of the Administrative Procedure Act and exceedingly likely to be overturned, and overturned quickly. And that doesn't even account for the fact that this would just be devastating for the American economy. If you essentially nullified the H-1B program this way, it would cause an immense labor shortage in key tech companies. As a result, you'd see either of these companies moving out of the United States, which could very well happen, or you would see values and valuations and, frankly, the stock market dropping as well. But this is a very obvious way to shoot the United States in the foot. There's no benefit to this. This does not benefit Americans. There are not some surplus of Americans who could work these jobs, but for the foreigners that are here. If they could work these jobs, they would be hired because they are the cheaper labor, not the more expensive labor. They are not hired because there aren't enough that have the requisite skills, because overwhelmingly the top graduates in STEM fields these days are from foreign countries. And that is a product of Americans not choosing those fields or not doing well in those fields. That's a separate issue. That's a distinct issue. But if you're an employer, you want the best person for the job, whether that person is foreign or domestic. If this were to ever be enforced, which I do not believe it will be, I would imagine that very quickly we would see a lot of hiring happening outside the United States, which is, again, bad for the U.S. economy. That's fewer people who are making large salaries, paying taxes, buying things. You want those people in the U.S. That's very important for our economy. The sort of net of this is stay calm, as with everything that Trump has been doing as it relates to foreign students and foreign labor. It's likely to be overturned very quickly, and it's really just about the headlines. One last note I wanted to make is just, why would Trump do this? If it's so obviously stupid and it's so obviously not legal, why would Donald Trump choose to do something like this? There's probably only one plausible explanation that I've seen, and that is that he's using this as a sort of pawn in the geopolitical confrontation with India. It started with Trump basically slapping them with 50% tariffs because they were purchasing Russian oil, and has brought India much closer to China and Russia as a result. I think that Donald Trump does not actually fully understand that this punishes American economy, not the Indian economy. That is to say, if these individuals from India don't come to the United States and they stay in India, they will contribute their immense talent and skills to the Indian economy, not to ours. So it is incredibly foolhardy. And the only reason that I could believe that he would do something so obviously idiotic as to shoot ourselves in the foot in this way is because he did the same thing with China earlier this year. He was saying, oh, we're not going to let Chinese students come to U.S. universities, maybe. And he issued that as a threat in his kind of confrontation with China, as though that's a punishment to them. It's not. That's not a punishment to them. Then having another country keep their best and brightest, as opposed to having them come to the United States, is a punishment for us, not for them. But he does seem to not get that. He seems to think that punishing the Indian workers who want H-1Bs is the same as punishing India. And I'm certain that he's surrounded by a population of individuals like Stephen Miller, who are essentially nativists and don't want H-1Bs in general, who are pushing this for their own agenda, right? Their own agenda is we don't want foreigners in this country, whereas Trump thinks that this is a good way of getting one over on our adversaries, as foolish as that might sound. In any event, that's the latest. Always an exciting day talking about Trump and his executive orders or proclamations. I think I said this for all the stuff earlier this year that he was doing for foreign students. I really wouldn't worry or panic. None of this is enforceable. It's going to be overturned. What you'll find is that the headlines are terrible, but the actual reality on the ground doesn't change. That was true in his first term. There was all this talk of really massive changes that was going to ruin the relationship between the US and China and restrict immigration and all of that. And then fundamentally what actually changed on the ground was nothing. That's how he works. He's all about getting big headlines. The follow through is irrelevant because all he really wanted was the headline. So he'll say, oh, this is a win for American workers. His base will be happy. It'll get overturned and people will ignore that part. But fundamentally, I don't expect there to be much of a shift. The only thing that might actually change, and they probably do have the authority to do, is to change the conditions on which an H-1B are granted. For example, they could say, we'll prioritize the highest paid H-1B workers rather than doing a random lottery. That they probably do have the authority to do, or at least they don't explicitly not have the authority to do it. That has been discussed, but as of right now, we don't know where that stands. In any event, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm sure that we'll be offering more insight into this as things move along. Have a good one.